It began with a playful bite, but that single touch bound him to passion power and a destiny across the stars. This is humanity, yeah. Lieutenant Commander Trevor Pratt had been told that diplomatic missions were supposed to be straightforward. At least that was the impression during the formal briefing aboard the Commonwealth vessel Intrepid. He was young by ambassadorial standards, barely in his mid-30s, but carried himself with the kind of calm resolve that came from years in military service before his sudden shift into the diplomatic corps. He had been chosen for this assignment precisely because of his versatility. The Commonwealth needed someone who could adapt quickly, represent humanity with dignity, and if necessary, stand firm under pressure. The briefing itself had been bland, almost deceptively so. Establish relations, learn their culture, lay the groundwork for future trade negotiations. Those were the main objectives. Straightforward enough, Trevor thought, but nothing in the briefing had mentioned being bitten. The moment it happened, he let out an involuntary yelp. "Ouch!" he exclaimed, jerking his hand back. The pressure on his fingers delivered through the thick diplomatic gloves was not painful enough to cause damage, but the suddenness of the act startled him. Standing before him was the alien liaison officer, a petite female with shimmering blue undertones to her otherwise human-like skin. Her iridescent eyes widened as if she had not expected his reaction. Without a word, she turned on her heel and left the reception hall, leaving Trevor standing alone with his hand halfway raised like an idiot. For a moment, all Trevor could do was stare at his gloved fingers. The impressions of teeth were faint but undeniable. What the hell was that for, he thought, heart still pounding from the surprise. He wasn't sure whether to laugh, get angry, or call for security. Before he could decide, a deep voice rumbled behind him. "Ambassador Pratt, I see you've met Liaison Officer Nera." Trevor turned to find himself face to face with Counselor Drell, the imposing Terralian official who had greeted him upon arrival. Drell's features were unmistakably alien compared to Nera's more delicate form. His azure skin tone was darker, and the ridges on his temples were thicker and more pronounced. The male's presence exuded authority, the kind that demanded attention without a single word. Trevor flexed his hand inside the glove, still stinging slightly. "Yes, though I'm not entirely sure what just happened. She bit me, then stormed off." Drell's expression shifted subtly, his stern features softening into something that might have been amusement. "Ah, I see the cultural briefing materials provided to your Commonwealth were incomplete." Incomplete, how Trevor asked, already dreading the answer. A gentle bite, Drell explained with careful neutrality, is a traditional Terralian gesture indicating romantic interest. It seems Officer Nera found you appealing. The blood rushed to Trevor's face so quickly he thought he might faint. Romantic interest. He had just yanked his hand away in shock, practically accusing her of assault, which meant that, from her perspective, he had just publicly rejected her in front of half the High Council's reception hall. Trevor groaned inwardly. First day on the job, and he had already managed to humiliate his assigned liaison officer. "Fantastic," he muttered under his breath. "These misunderstandings are common in first contact scenarios," Drell said diplomatically. "Perhaps I should assign you another liaison." "No," Trevor interrupted firmly. The words came from his gut faster than his mind could process them. "If I'm going to represent humanity properly, I need to fix this myself. Where would I find Officer Nera?" Drell's brow ridge lifted in faint surprise at the human's determination. "She will be in the Eastern Gardens at this hour. It is where many go to compose themselves." "Then that's where I'm headed," Trevor replied with finality. He straightened the ceremonial sash across his chest and offered a stiff nod. "With your permission, Counselor." Drell inclined his head, the ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "Permission granted. May fortune guide you, Ambassador." The quarters of the High Council building gleam with a strange fusion of ancient craftsmanship and futuristic design. Terralian architecture favored sweeping curves and organic materials, creating spaces that felt both monumental and alive. The polished floors reflected golden light from panels etched with intricate patterns, while columns of carved stone rose seamlessly into ceilings that glowed with embedded crystals. It was breathtaking, and Trevor allowed himself a brief moment of wonder before returning his focus to the task at hand. Find Nara. Apologize. Don't screw this up further. The Eastern Gardens were easy enough to locate. A massive archway opened into a sprawling oasis of flora unlike anything Trevor had ever seen. Plants with vibrant purple and cobalt petals stretched toward the sky, their sweet fragrance heavy in the air. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying with it the sound of distant water flowing over carved stone channels. The entire place felt like a sanctuary deliberately designed for contemplation and healing. There at the center of the garden sat Nara. She occupied a bench carved from a single block of amber-colored stone, her posture stiff, her gaze fixed on the blossoms before her. Her midnight blue hair shimmered under Turalia's golden sun strands, catching the light as though woven with silver threads. From this distance, she looked delicate, almost fragile, though Trevor knew better. As he approached, she noticed him immediately. Her back straightened and her expression hardened into something unreadable. Trevor stopped a respectful distance away, placing his hands at his sides. "Officer Nara," he began, voice steady but warm. "I owe you an apology." Her eyes narrowed, slightly guarded. "For what ambassador publicly humiliating me?" "For my ignorance," Trevor replied honestly. "I didn't understand the significance of your gesture. On Earth, my homeworld, biting someone isn't typically considered friendly." Her brows arched. "And what is it considered?" "Usually an attack," Trevor admitted, "or at the very least, extremely forward behavior reserved for established partners." Something flickered across her face, confusion giving way to dawning realization. "So when I bit you, I thought you were either trying to hurt me or making an extremely inappropriate advance," Trevor said, managing a self-deprecating smile, neither of which I expected from a diplomatic liaison. For a heartbeat, Nara remained stone-faced. Then unexpectedly, her lips curved upward and a soft musical laugh spilled from her throat. The sound was disarming, pulling the tension out of the air like a breeze scattering smoke. "By the twin stars," she said, shaking her head. "What a disaster. And here I thought I was being subtle." Subtle, Trevor couldn't help but chuckle. Is biting considered subtle flirtation on Turalia? Compared to some of our other courtship rituals, absolutely. She said, her smile fading just slightly. Though I should not have been so forward with an off-worlder. It was unprofessional. Trevor took a tentative seat on the opposite end of her bench, maintaining a careful distance. "Perhaps we could start over." He extended a hand, palm up. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Trevor Pratt, Human Ambassador to Turalia, and I promise not to misinterpret any more of your cultural customs, at least not intentionally." Her gaze softened, the tension easing from her shoulders. Slowly, she placed her delicate hand in his. "I am Liaison Officer Naratal, assigned to facilitate your mission, and I promise not to bite you again, without proper warning." Trevor laughed, the sound echoing lightly through the garden. Their eyes met, and in that instant, something unspoken passed between them. It was not quite understanding, not yet, but the recognition of possibility. Two very different beings standing on opposite ends of a cultural chasm, suddenly realizing there might be a bridge. "Perhaps," Trevor said, releasing her hand gently, "you could show me around this beautiful planet of yours, preferably with a running commentary on which gestures might get me into trouble." Nara rose gracefully, her smile returning in full. "I believe I can manage that, Ambassador. Though I should warn you, there are quite a few." Trevor stood to join her, feeling lighter than he had since stepping foot on Turelian soil. He had come expecting formalities and politics. Instead, he found himself at the beginning of something far more unpredictable, something complicated, challenging, and if the warmth lingering in Nara's smile was any indication, infinitely more interesting. As they walked side by side through the garden's winding paths, Trevor felt a strange certainty take root inside him. His mission was no longer just about treaties and trade. It was about connection. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was about something even deeper than that. The next 2 days unfolded with surprising smoothness. Trevor immersed himself in official briefings, guided tours, and cultural introductions, always with Nara at his side. The earlier misunderstanding, while embarrassing, had somehow broken the ice between them. She was no longer stiffly professional, but warmer, more willing to explain customs, even to poke gentle fun at him when he blundered into mistakes. Trevor, for his part, made a conscious effort to observe before speaking, to listen, before assuming. Every nuance mattered here. Terralia was an old world, its civilization stretching back thousands of years before humanity's first tentative steps into space. Though technologically advanced, they valued tradition as much as innovation. Every gesture, every shared meal, every bow or nod of the head carried weight. By the time the formal banquet approached, Trevor felt cautiously optimistic. He had learned how to greet elders by pressing palms together rather than shaking hands. He knew not to stare too long at the ceremonial ridges that adorned high-ranking officials, since those markings represented ancestral lineage. And he had even memorized a few basic Turalian phrases enough to spark smiles from council attendants who clearly appreciated the effort. Still nothing prepared him for the spectacle of the grand banquet hall. The chamber stretched high and wide, illuminated by crystalline chandeliers that radiated soft golden light. Carved stone pillars lined the hall, each etched with ancient symbols depicting triumphs of Turalian history. Long tables were arranged in concentric arcs around a raised platform where the High Council sat. Delegations from all 7 provinces had gathered, their formal attire shimmering in hues of deep blues, silvers, and emeralds. The air buzzed with anticipation, and Trevor quickly realized the truth of Nera's earlier warning. He was the first human most of them had ever seen. "There are a lot of people here," he murmured to Nera, adjusting the high collar of his Commonwealth dress uniform. "Representatives from all 7 provinces," she explained softly, her gown flowing like liquid midnight. It hugged her slender frame with effortless elegance, its fabric catching the light in ways that made her seem almost otherworldly. "Your arrival is significant, Ambassador. They will all wish to see you." "No pressure," Trevor muttered, forcing his shoulders back and standing taller. Nera's lips curved into that familiar, teasing smile. "Just follow my lead and try not to bite anyone." He shot her a look, half exasperated, half amused. "Very funny." They were seated at the high table Trevor positioned between Counselor Drell and Nera. Plates were placed before them in careful sequence, each course more elaborate than the last. Some dishes looked familiar enough, grilled meats, spiced vegetables, while others were utterly alien, gelatinous or crystalline in texture, glowing faintly under the chandeliers. Trevor sampled cautiously, relying on Nera's subtle nods to guide him. "The blue fruit is particularly delicious," she suggested at one point, gesturing toward a star-shaped item on his plate. Trevor picked it up, examining the strange glossy skin. "How do I eat it?" "Just bite in." "No," Nera said quickly, reaching across to stop him. Her fingers brushed his, sending an unexpected jolt through him. "You must peel away the outer layer first." "Here, allow me." She took the fruit delicately from his hand, her long fingers moving with practiced grace as she stripped away the outer skin. The pale flesh beneath glistened fragrant and inviting. When she handed it back, her gesture was oddly ceremonial, her eyes lingering on his as though waiting for something. Trevor hesitated for half a second before taking a bite. The flavor exploded on his tongue, sweet, tangy, with undertones of cinnamon and citrus. His eyes widened in delight. "That's amazing." Then silence fell around them. Trevor glanced up, noticing several nearby Turalians staring. Their expressions ranged from amusement to open shock. Even Counselor Drell raised one ridged brow. Trevor leaned closer to Nera, whispering urgently, "Did I just do something wrong?" Nera's cheeks darkened, the Turalian equivalent of a blush. "Not wrong exactly. But when a female prepares food for a male and he accepts it directly from her hands, it is considered an intimate gesture." Trevor froze mid-chew. How intimate? "In our culture," she admitted, her voice barely audible, "it is essentially a public declaration of romantic intent." He nearly choked on the fruit. "So I just announced to the entire High Council that we're courting them." "Yes," Nera confirmed, her gaze fixed firmly on her plate. "Though as an off-worlder, most will assume you were simply unaware of the custom." Trevor's heart hammered in his chest. "And what about you? What will they assume about your intentions?" Nera hesitated, then answered quietly, "They will assume that I am open to the possibility." The words hung between them like a charged current. Trevor studied her face, noting the slight tension in her jaw, the way her eyes flicked to his before quickly darting away. It hit him all at once. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had orchestrated this moment. Strangely, he wasn't angry. In fact, something about her boldness intrigued him. Well, he said carefully, forcing a wry smile since we've already scandalized half the room, perhaps you could tell me what other customs might get me into trouble. Her eyes widened slightly, then softened with surprise. You're not angry. Why would I be? Trevor asked, genuinely puzzled. Unless this was some elaborate revenge for the biting incident. At that, she laughed, a soft, genuine sound that eased his tension. No, nothing so petty. I find you fascinating, Trevor Pratt. Your species resembles mine so closely, and yet your perspectives are refreshingly different. I wanted to explore the possibility of something more than professional courtesy. Her honesty startled him. On Earth, such a confession would have taken weeks of subtle gestures, endless second-guessing, and awkward silences. But the Tyrellian approach was startlingly direct and refreshing. I'm flattered, Trevor admitted, his voice steady. And I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. But there are complications, she finished for him, her smile tinged with sadness. I know. Before he could say more, Counselor Drell rose to his feet, calling the hall to order for the evening's formal speeches. The moment between them dissipated, though not forgotten. Throughout the rest of the banquet, Trevor found himself hyper-aware of Nara's presence. The subtle scent of her skin, jasmine, was something more exotic. The grace of her movements, the quiet intelligence in the way she explained each nuance of the ceremony. When their hands brushed while reaching for their huffs, neither pulled away immediately. The contact lingered, deliberate, charged with unspoken possibility. Later that night, back in his assigned quarters, Trevor replayed the incident over and over in his mind. On paper, his mission was simple: strengthen diplomatic ties. In practice, it now involved cultural landmines at every step. He had to navigate carefully, balancing duty with personal feelings that were growing harder to ignore. Still, he couldn't shake the memory of Nara's laughter, the warmth in her eyes, the sincerity of her admission. She hadn't just made a diplomatic gesture. She had risked her reputation, her professional standing to reach across the divide, and he had accepted it publicly. The implications were staggering. The next morning, as their transport glided above Tyrellia's capital, on the way to a provincial tour, Nara broke the silence with a rare hint of nervousness. About last night, she began softly. Trevor turned from the window, meeting her gaze. Yeah. I should clarify. When I offered you the fruit, it wasn't merely impulse. I knew what it meant. I wanted you to know how I felt. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the vulnerability beneath her usually composed exterior. Trevor leaned back, exhaling slowly. And now half your government thinks we're courting. Do you regret it? She shook her head firmly. No, do you? Trevor hesitated, then smiled. Not for a second. Complicated, yes. But regret, no. For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but comfortable. Outside, the golden sun bathed Tyrellia's vast landscapes, rolling forests, gleaming rivers, and mountain ranges that sparkled with crystalline deposits. Inside the cabin, Trevor realized that his mission had just shifted into uncharted territory. What had begun as a diplomatic formality was fast becoming something far more personal. And as much as it frightened him, it thrilled him even more. The transport descended through layers of mist, revealing a landscape that looked more like a painting than reality. Kalatha, Nara explained, was one of the oldest Tyrellian provinces, a region where tradition clung stubbornly to life, even as the rest of the planet embraced modernity. From above, Trevor could see villages woven from living plants and stone, their roofs shaped like spirals of ivy. Waterfalls cascaded down sheer cliffs, feeding rivers that wound through forests glowing faintly with bioluminescent vines. It's beautiful, Trevor murmured, pressing a hand to the viewport. An archaic Nara added, though her voice held a certain reverence. Calathans hold fast to customs that predate even our first steps into space. You must tread carefully here, Ambassador. Trevor glanced at her. Define carefully. They observe courtship rituals with particular strictness, and they are less open-minded about interspecies relationships. A warning bell rang in Trevor's mind. So I should expect suspicion. Yes, Nara hesitated, but I will be by your side. That assurance, quiet though it was, settled something inside him. When the transport landed, a small delegation awaited them on the platform. At its center stood Governor Thane, an imposing figure with elaborate markings tattooed along his face and arms, symbols of lineage that Nara had instructed Trevor not to stare at. The governor greeted them with formality, his eyes sharp with curiosity. Ambassador Pratt Thine intoned, "You honor Kalatha with your presence. We welcome the chance to learn of humanity." Trevor bowed in the Terralian style he had practiced, palms pressed together. "The honor is mine, Governor. I come with respect and open intent." The exchange passed smoothly, though Trevor noticed the way onlookers whispered among themselves, their gazes wary. Some regarded him with frank curiosity. Others looked at him as though he were an intruder. It was a reminder that beneath the grandeur of ceremony, suspicion lingered like a shadow. Their accommodations were in a guest pavilion overlooking a magnificent waterfall. The interior was a marvel of stone and living wood, the walls pulsing faintly with life. But when Trevor stepped inside, his eyes widened. There was only one sleeping chamber. He turned to the attendant in confusion. "There seems to be a misunderstanding." Before he could finish, Nara shot him a subtle look, shaking her head ever so slightly. She waited until the attendant had departed before speaking. "It's not a mistake," she said quietly. "In Calathan culture, unmarried travelers of opposite genders are always housed together." Trevor blinked. "Why?" "It is an ancient custom meant to prevent impropriety. The assumption is simple. If two people travel together, they must already be intimate partners. To suggest otherwise would imply dishonorable intentions." Trevor dragged a hand through his hair. "So, we're expected to share quarters?" "Yes." Nara's cheeks darkened with the flush Trevor had learned to recognize. "I can request separate accommodations, but it would cause considerable offense." The tension in the air shifted thick and electric. Trevor felt acutely aware of the space around them, how small it suddenly seemed despite the pavilion's elegance. He forced a chuckle. "I'll sleep on the floor then." Nara looked genuinely startled. "That would be considered a grave insult to me. It would suggest I am undesirable." "That's definitely not the issue," Trevor blurted before he could stop himself. The words hung between them heavier than he intended. Their eyes met, and the silence stretched. Nara's lips parted as though she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she exhaled, her voice soft. "Trevor, I should clarify something." He stepped closer without meaning to, drawn by the vulnerability in her tone. "When I arranged the fruit ritual at the banquet," she said, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, "it wasn't impulse. I've been drawn to you since the moment we met. Your reaction when I bit you was disappointing, yes, but understandable given the cultural divide. And now, I find myself in the peculiar position of being forced by tradition to share quarters with someone I genuinely wish to be close to." Her honesty knocked the air out of him. Trevor had expected her to deflect, to insist on professionalism. Instead, she had laid her heart bare. "It's both convenient and terribly awkward." She finished, her eyes flicking up to meet his. Trevor's pulse thundered in his ears. He stepped close enough to catch the faint scent of jasmine that clung to her. "I'm attracted to you too, Nara. But I don't want our personal feelings to compromise the mission." "Among my people," she countered softly, "personal connections strengthen diplomatic ties. We believe true understanding between species comes through genuine bonds." "Is that the official position or yours?" he asked, managing a small smile. "Both." Her answering smile was tentative but real. "But I will not pressure you. If you prefer, we can keep professional boundaries." Trevor studied her face. She was so different and yet so familiar. The tilt of her eyes, the curve of her jaw, the strength beneath her vulnerability. And in that moment, he realized something profound. Every diplomatic treaty, every alliance, every bridge between species began with exactly this: two individuals daring to connect. "What if I don't prefer that?" he asked quietly. Her eyes widened. "Then we must discuss cultural implications." Among Talians, physical intimacy creates a bond not easily broken. It's not entered into lightly. Trevor nodded slowly. "It's not so different for humans, at least not for me." Her breath caught. With trembling fingers, she reached up to trace the line of his jaw. The gesture was startlingly human, achingly intimate. "There would be challenges," she whispered. "Cultural differences we haven't even discovered yet." "I'm a diplomat," he reminded her, his lips quirking. "Navigating differences is literally my job." Her laughter, soft and musical, filled the chamber. True enough. The moment stretched, filled with possibility. Then with deliberate slowness, Nara leaned forward and pressed her teeth gently against his shoulder. Not biting, not hard, just the lightest pressure through his uniform. This time, Trevor understood perfectly. That night, moonlight filtered through the pavilion windows, bathing them in silver. What had begun as enforced cohabitation became something far deeper. Words gave way to touch, hesitation, to certainty. The bond they formed transcended cultural and biological divides, as though the universe itself conspired to remind them that love in any form was universal. Afterward, they lay together in silence, Nera's head resting on his chest, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat blending with the whisper of the waterfall outside. "I have a confession," she murmured sleepily. Trevor stroked her midnight hair. "What's that?" "The separate quarters option does exist. It would only have required an obscene amount of paperwork." He laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Devious. I'm beginning to think Talians and humans have more in common than anyone realizes." "Perhaps that's why I was so drawn to you from the beginning," she replied, her voice dreamy. "There is something familiar about you, and yet excitingly different." Trevor closed his eyes, allowing himself the rare luxury of peace. For all the complexity and risk, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he did not regret a single moment. The following morning, however, that peace was shattered. As Trevor dressed, he noticed something odd. His senses felt sharper. The sound of distant water seemed clearer, the air more fragrant. When he caught his reflection, his eyes looked brighter, more alert than usual. He flexed his fingers, marveling at the ease with which his body moved. "Something feels different," he muttered. Nera turned, concern flickering in her eyes. "Different how?" "Stronger," he admitted. "Sharper. Like I've had the best sleep of my life and more energy than I know what to do with." Her expression tightened. "It could be the compound TR290. It's present in our physiology. Perhaps your contact with me." Trevor raised a hand, gently stopping her. "If it came from you, I'm not worried. I'll take it as it comes." But in the back of his mind, unease stirred. Whatever was happening to him, it was only the beginning. The dawn blessing ceremony was not on their official itinerary. Governor Thane extended the invitation the evening before, his tone respectful but expectant. Nera explained it was one of Calatha's most sacred traditions, a ritual honoring new beginnings. Declining would be seen as a grave insult. Trevor agreed immediately. Diplomacy, after all, was about respect. But as he stood in the ancient amphitheater at sunrise with hundreds of Calathans watching, he began to suspect he had underestimated the gravity of the event. The amphitheater was carved directly into the mountainside, its stone steps worn smooth by centuries of ritual. As the twin suns crested the horizon, light spilled across the crowd, turning every ridge and marking into firelit gold. Elders poured iridescent liquid into a central basin, their chanting low and rhythmic. The sound resonated in Trevor's chest, primal and otherworldly. Governor Thane approached, robes adorned with intricate symbols Trevor couldn't decipher. "Ambassador Pratt, Officer Tal, you honor us with your participation." Trevor glanced at Nera, who gave the smallest of nods. Together they stepped forward. "The blessing recognizes new beginnings for individuals, partnerships, and communities," Thane intoned. He dipped an ornate chalice into the basin, offering it first to Nera. She sipped, then handed it to Trevor. The liquid was thick, golden tasting, faintly of honey and spice. Trevor swallowed, noting the warmth that spread instantly through his body. He passed the chalice back, expecting that to be the end of it. Instead, Thane grasped his right hand and Nera's left, pressing them together between his palms. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Before the sacred waters and the twin suns, we recognize this union between worlds," Thane declared. "May it strengthen the bonds of our peoples and bring harmony to the stars." The amphitheater erupted in approving calls. Trevor froze, his diplomatic smile plastered in place. "What just happened?" he whispered. Nera's eyes were wide, her voice barely audible. "He performed a binding ceremony." "Binding. In Calathan law," she explained rapidly, "it is marriage. We're married." Trevor nearly choked. "Married without our consent. By drinking together and standing in the circle, we technically gave consent." Fantastic. First, he'd insulted her by rejecting a bite. Then he'd publicly courted her with fruit. And now he'd apparently married her in front of half a province. He didn't have long to process the bombshell. His wrist communicator buzzed urgently, the Commonwealth's emergency frequency. "Pratt, here," he whispered, turning away slightly. "This is Medical Officer Lang aboard the Intrepid," came the voice. "Commander, your biometric feed shows elevated levels of an unknown compound TR-290. It's native to Talian physiology, but we've never seen it in a human. Early analysis suggests potential neurological impact. We recommend immediate return for testing." Trevor's eyes flicked to Nara. She was watching him, concern etched across her features. "What kind of impacts?" he asked quietly. "Unknown. Possibly harmful with prolonged exposure." Trevor clenched his jaw. "Understood. I'll arrange transport." He cut the link, turning back to Nara. "What's wrong?" she asked. "They detected a Talian compound in my system. Likely from us. They're worried about long-term effects." Her hand dropped from his arm as though burned. Pain flashed across her face. "From me. They didn't specify, but it seems likely. I would never knowingly harm you," she whispered. "I know," Trevor said quickly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's just an unexpected reaction. They want me back on the ship." Nara drew in a steadying breath. "Of course. We'll leave immediately." The transport lifted off a few hours later, carrying them back toward the capital. Trevor sat strapped into his seat, trying to ignore the gnawing unease. His body still felt strange, sharper, stronger, more focused. Every sound rang clearer, every detail sharper. The supposed threat felt like a gift. "You seem different," Nara observed, softly watching him. "I feel different," he admitted. "Stronger. Faster. It doesn't feel dangerous." "Adaptogenic," she murmured. "Our biochemistry responds to its environment. Perhaps it's responding to you." Before Trevor could answer, the ship jolted violently. Red warning lights flared. "Unidentified vessel on approach," the pilot shouted. Trevor and Nara rushed to the cockpit. Through the viewport, a sleek predatory craft bore down on them, its angular wings unmistakable. "Very," Trevor said grimly. "You know them?" the pilot asked. "Unfortunately, the Commonwealth has clashed with them before. Expansionists. They see diplomacy as weakness." A blast of energy slammed into the transport's flank. Consoles sparked alarms, screamed. "They're not trying to destroy us," the pilot said through gritted teeth. "They're trying to force us down." "Why would the Very target a diplomatic shuttle?" Nara demanded. Trevor's mind raced. How quickly would news of our binding ceremony spread? Almost instantly, Nara admitted. It would be considered major diplomatic news. Trevor's stomach sank. Then it's not random. They know. They're trying to stop us. The pilot swore as another blast crippled their engines. "We can't hold altitude. We'll set down in that valley." The transport shuddered violently as it descended. Trevor gripped the bulkhead, noting again how easily his body adapted to the chaos. His reflexes compensated instinctively far better than training alone could explain. The landing was rough but survivable. The ship skidded into a clearing, trees snapping, dust billowing. Silence fell except for the hiss of cooling metal. "Kill all power," Trevor ordered. "They'll scan for signatures." The pilot obeyed. Trevor turned to Nara. "Tell me, what does the binding mean politically?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "Educated guess," Trevor interrupted. "The Vari wouldn't risk this unless it shifted the balance of power." She hesitated, then answered. "According to ancient law, when an off-worlder binds with a Talian, they gain status as a protected ally. That includes territorial rights within our system." Trevor swore softly. "And the Meridian Belt. Rich in resources," the pilot said grimly. "Long contested between us and the Very. If humans now count as protected allies, the Commonwealth could legally back Terralia's claim." "Which means the Very see me as a threat to their expansion," Trevor concluded. A proximity alarm beeped. "They're landing nearby," the pilot warned. Trevor made a snap decision. "You two head for the tree line. I'll draw them away." "Absolutely not," Nara protested. "You're the one they want." "And I'm the one with unexpected enhancements," Trevor countered. "Trust me, I can handle myself." The look they shared was heavy with unspoken emotion. Nara finally nodded, but her eyes burned with defiance. "I'm not leaving you." The pilot broke in. "There's an emergency beacon in the survival kit. If I can reach the ridge, I can signal for help." "Go," Trevor ordered. "We'll cover you." From the emergency locker, Trevor retrieved a stunner pistol. Non-lethal, but effective. He checked the charge, then handed Nara a compact blade. "Stay close to me," he said. "Whatever happens, we keep moving toward Terrellian jurisdiction. Once we're under council protection, the Vari won't risk open aggression. Through the viewport, 6 armored Vari figures emerged from their craft, tall and angular, with exoskeletal plating that gleamed in the sun. They moved with predatory precision, weapons raised. Trevor felt his pulse quicken, not with fear, but with exhilaration. His body thrummed with energy, every sense alive. "Ready?" he asked. Nara's hand found his, squeezing briefly. Together, they moved. The clash was brutal. Trevor's stunner dropped the first Vari before it had fully raised its weapon. Nara fought with startling ferocity, her blade flashing in precise arcs. Trevor's reflexes astonished even himself. He ducked and rolled with a speed that felt impossible, his strikes landing harder than training should allow. But numbers overwhelmed them. A neural disruptor caught Trevor in the chest, dropping him to his knees. Even then, his body resisted consciousness, clinging to the edge. He saw Nara take down one opponent before another slammed a weapon into her side, forcing her down. As blackness closed in, Trevor's last thought was not of defeat, but of determination. Whatever the Vari intended, they would not break him, not while Nara fought at his side. When he awoke, he was in a cell, metallic walls, smooth sound dampening. His wrists were bound in restraints that felt oddly comfortable despite their strength. Across from him, Nara sat with her back against the wall, her eyes closed, breathing steady. "You're staring," she said without opening her eyes. "Just admiring your combat skills," Trevor replied. His voice was hoarse but steady. "You never mentioned you were trained in hand-to-hand." Her lips curved faintly. "All liaisons receive basic training. I may have exceeded basic when I saw them hurt you." Before Trevor could answer, the cell door hissed open. 2 Vari entered, one, a guard in heavy exoskeletal armor, the other smaller, unarmored, with mandibles twitching thoughtfully. "I am Researcher Krell," the smaller one said in surprisingly fluent Commonwealth standard. "I wish to speak without military interference." Trevor exchanged a glance with Nara. She gave a subtle nod. "We're listening," Trevor said. The Vari holding cell was unlike any prison Trevor had ever imagined. There were no bars, no visible locks, only seamless, metallic walls that seemed to swallow sound. Even his breathing felt muffled, as though the chamber itself disapproved of noise. He tested the cuffs binding his wrists. They were light, almost too comfortable, but immovable. He pulled once, twice, and no give. Across the room, Nara sat cross-legged against the wall, her eyes closed in meditation. Even now, her presence calmed him, though he could still see the faint bruise on her temple from the fight. "You're staring again," she said softly, not opening her eyes. Trevor smirked faintly. "Just admiring your combat skills. You never told me you were a fighter." Her lips twitched in a small smile. "All diplomatic liaisons receive basic defense training, though perhaps I exceeded basic when I saw them hurt you." Trevor's chest tightened at the quiet confession. "Remind me not to get on your bad side." The door hissed open with a soft sigh. 2 Vari stepped inside, one guard in imposing exoskeletal armor, the other unarmored and smaller mandibles twitching with curiosity. "I am Researcher Krell," the smaller one said in remarkably fluent Commonwealth standard. "I wish to speak without the interference of military protocols." Trevor and Nara exchanged a glance. Slowly, they both stood, restraints clicking softly as they moved. "We're listening," Trevor said evenly. Krell gestured. The guard removed their restraints, then left, leaving the door ajar. A show of confidence or trust. "Our commander believes your binding threatens Vari interests in the Meridian Belt," Krell began. "He intends to use you as leverage." "And you disagree?" Nara asked, her tone sharp. "I represent a faction within Vari society that questions our isolationism," Krell explained. "We believe conflict is wasteful. Cooperation with both Talians and humans could yield far greater benefits." Trevor narrowed his eyes. "Why tell us this?" "Because your situation presents an opportunity," Krell said bluntly. "A human and a Talian bound by ancient law, unprecedented. It suggests compatibility no one imagined." "Compatibility," Trevor echoed. Krell's mandibles clicked. "Our scans of your physiology confirm it. The compound TR-290 has integrated into your system in ways that should be impossible. Instead of harming you, it enhances you. Stronger reflexes, heightened senses, even empathic resonance." Nara stiffened. "You scanned him without consent." "Standard procedure for all prisoners," Krell said dismissively. But the results were far from standard. Your bond is accelerating changes we did not predict. Trevor's mind raced. The sharpness of his senses, the ease with which he had moved in battle, it all aligned with Krell's words. And you think this is good? It suggests a path forward, Krell said, his voice carrying conviction. If Tyrellian biochemistry can benefit humans, perhaps there are similar compatibilities between Vari and other species. Imagine alliances built not on fragile treaties, but on biological synergy. Nara stepped closer to Trevor, her shoulder brushing his. The subtle contact steadied him, though he could sense the tension in her frame. What exactly are you proposing, Krell? Help me convince Commander Vex, Krell said simply. Show him that conflict is unnecessary, that cooperation, perhaps even a three-way accord, would serve us all better than bloodshed. Trevor studied the researcher. Vari expressions were hard to read, but something in Krell's posture suggested sincerity. And if we refuse, then you remain prisoners until the commander decides your fate, Krell said matter-of-factly. I cannot override his authority, but I can influence him with your help. The alien turned and left, leaving them unrestrained but confined. Silence filled the chamber. Nara finally broke it, her voice low. Can we trust him? Not entirely, Trevor admitted, but his interest in the compound seems genuine. And if there really is a faction pushing for diplomacy, it might be our only chance. Nara sighed and slid down to sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. The simple closeness sent warmth through him, stronger than the golden liquid at the ceremony. I'm sorry, she whispered. When I bit your glove that first day, I never imagined it would lead to interstellar politics in an enemy cell. Trevor laughed softly. I've had worse first dates. Her head snapped toward him, incredulous. This qualifies as a date by human standard. Shared danger, exotic location, interesting conversation. He intertwined their fingers, checked several boxes. She rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head lightly against his shoulder. The quiet stretched comfortable despite their surroundings. And then Trevor felt something new. A warmth, a pulse, not of the body, but of the mind. Emotions, not his own, brushing faintly against his consciousness. Nara's anxiety, her determination, her affection. I can feel you, he murmured in wonder. Her breath hitched. The binding, she whispered. Among Talians-bound pairs sometimes develop empathic resonance, but it usually takes years, not days. Maybe the compound accelerated it, Trevor said softly. Or maybe humans and Talians are more compatible than anyone thought. She turned her midnight blue hair, brushing his cheek. Their lips met tentative at first, then with rising certainty. The kiss carried not just warmth, but connection, a fusion of thought and feeling that transcended biology. For the first time since the mission began, Trevor felt utterly certain whatever obstacles lay ahead, he wanted to face them with her. When they parted, her eyes shone with determination. We need to use this. Krell's faction wants proof that cooperation is possible, then we'll give it to them. Trevor nodded. If the compound benefits humans, maybe there's something humanity can offer the Vari too. A scientific exchange instead of territorial disputes. And if they refuse, she asked. He smiled faintly. Then we find another way. But I didn't come all this way, get accidentally married, and develop superhuman reflexes just to give up now. Her laugh was soft, musical, achingly familiar. When you put it that way, the Vari don't stand a chance. Hours passed before the guards returned, escorting them through the labyrinthine corridors of the Vari vessel. Trevor noted every detail, the disciplined movements of soldiers, the humming of alien machinery, the tension in the air. Word of their presence had clearly spread. Finally, they entered the command chamber, a hive of activity, holographic displays flickering with ship movements. At the center stood Commander Vex, a towering figure clad in ceremonial armor, etched with markings of rank. His presence radiated authority, his mandibles clicking with irritation the moment he saw them. The prisoners should not be here, Vex snapped. They may be our best chance to avoid bloodshed, Krell countered. The human has a proposal. All eyes turned to Trevor. He stepped forward, drawing on every ounce of training, every instinct honed in both war and diplomacy. His heart hammered, but the strange calm of TR-290 steadied him. He gestured toward Nara standing tall at his side. I am Lieutenant Commander Trevor Pratt of the Commonwealth, he said firmly. What began as a diplomatic mission has become something none of us anticipated. My binding with liaison officer Naratal was not a military maneuver, but a cultural misunderstanding that grew into something genuine. Your personal entanglements are irrelevant. Vex dismissed coldly. The legal implications threaten very sovereignty. They present an unprecedented opportunity, Trevor countered. The compound in my system, the one your researchers have been studying, proves compatibility between our species. Instead of fighting over borders, we can explore connections that benefit us all. The chamber buzzed with murmurs. Vex's mandibles twitched in irritation, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. This isn't just about me, Trevor pressed on. It's about proving that differences don't have to divide us. Humanity's strength isn't in weapons or fleets. It's in our ability to connect, to adapt, to build bridges, even where none seem possible. Nara stepped forward, her hand finding Trevor's. The ancient laws that grant territorial rights through binding were written long before spaceflight. Perhaps it's time to reinterpret them not as a cause for war, but as a foundation for cooperation. The room fell silent. Vex stared at them both unreadable. Finally, his mandibles clicked once. You are either very brave, he said slowly, or very foolish. Optimistic, Trevor replied with a faint smile. The confrontation had only just begun, but Trevor sensed the tide shifting. With Krell's support, Nara's presence, and the strange energy of TR-290 coursing through him, he felt ready. Ready not just to survive, but to change the course of history. The command chamber of the Vari vessel buzzed with tension. Holographic projections flickered showing two ships in orbit, the Intrepid of the Commonwealth and a Tyrellian cruiser, both holding position but clearly ready for escalation. Vari officers moved with precision around their stations, but their furtive glances betrayed unease. Trevor stood at the center, Nara beside him, their hands still linked. The empathic bond hummed like a low vibration between them. Her steady presence in his mind gave him strength, though he could feel her anxiety pulsing too. Commander Vex loomed above them, his exoskeletal armor etched with markings of rank. His mandibles clicked in irritation. You are reckless, human. By standing here, you force my hand. My people demand I crush any threat to our sovereignty. Trevor didn't flinch. I'm not here to threaten. I'm here to offer a choice conflict or cooperation. Vex's mandibles snapped shut, unimpressed. You speak as though there is a middle path. There is, Trevor insisted. The compound in my system, TR-290, proves biological compatibility between humans and Talians. If that's possible, what else might be scientific exchange, resource sharing, cooperation, instead of endless territorial disputes? Krell stepped forward, his voice steady. Commander, our scans confirm it. The human's physiology has not only adapted but improved. This could mark the beginning of discoveries that benefit all species, Vari included. A murmur rippled through the command chamber. Vari officers exchanged glances. Some looked skeptical, others intrigued. Speculation Vex dismissed. And even if true, why should the Vari share what is ours? Because the Meridian Belt isn't yours, Trevor countered, his voice firm but calm. It isn't Terralia's or the Commonwealth's alone either. But it can be all of ours together. Instead of fighting over scraps, we can build something greater. Joint research stations, shared mining operations, an accord that ensures no one walks away empty-handed. Counselor Drell's voice cut across the chamber as the holographic display shifted. His stern face appeared projected from the Tyrellian cruiser. Ambassador Pratt, is that your proposal? Yes, Trevor said clearly, making sure every Vari officer heard. A three-way accord, shared access to the Meridian Belt, shared science, shared future. Captain Harrington of the Intrepid appeared beside Drell's projection, her expression sharp with concern. Trevor, are you certain of this? These are dangerous adversaries. They don't have to be adversaries, Trevor replied. This is our chance to change the story, to prove that our greatest strength isn't our weapons, but our ability to build bridges. For a long, tense moment, the chamber was silent. Finally, Vex turned to his officers. Withdraw the targeting locks. Signal the orbital ships that we are considering. The Vari technicians obeyed reluctantly, but Trevor saw the flicker of relief in their movements. You gamble with the fate of 3 civilizations, Vex growled, turning back to him. If this fails, the blood will be on your hands. Trevor met his gaze evenly. If it succeeds, the peace will be on all of ours. The negotiations stretched for hours. Terms were argued, points contested, concessions demanded. Trevor spoke with clarity and conviction, Nera translating subtle cultural nuances when needed. Krell became an unlikely ally, presenting data on TR-290's potential benefits with the passion of a true scientist. By the end a framework was drafted, the Meridian Belt would become a joint research and development zone. Resources would be shared equitably among the Vari-Tyrolians and Commonwealth. Scientific teams from all three would collaborate to study biochemical compatibilities, starting with TR-290. It wasn't perfect. Distrust lingered and old grudges would not vanish overnight. But it was a beginning. When Trevor and Nera finally boarded a shuttle to the Intrepid, exhaustion weighed on them like lead. Yet as the Vari vessel receded into the distance, Trevor felt a quiet triumph. They had turned captivity into cooperation, conflict into accord. Nera leaned against him, her midnight hair brushing his cheek. "Not bad for a mission that began with a misunderstanding," she murmured. Trevor laughed softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm starting to think that bite was the best thing that ever happened to me." 6 months later, Earth's Pacific Ocean stretched before them, waves crashing against the shore as the sun dipped below the horizon. Trevor stood barefoot in the sand, Nera's hand in his. She watched the sunset with wide eyes, her skin glowing softly in the fading light. "I still can't believe it all began with a mistake," she said, toes curling in the wet sand. "The best stories often do," Trevor replied, pulling her closer. Behind them, humanity had embraced the alliance cautiously but with growing hope. The Tyrolian Human Vari Accord had been formalized, transforming a disputed asteroid belt into a symbol of cooperation. Scientific teams thrived in joint stations, discovering unexpected compatibilities between species. The compound TR-290 was no longer seen as a threat, but as a gift, a bridge across biology itself. And for Trevor and Nera, the bond that had begun with a bite and solidified in chains had only deepened. Their empathic connection grew stronger by the day, a constant reminder that love could cross not just cultures, but species. "Will your people truly accept me?" Nera asked quietly, her voice carrying both hope and doubt. Trevor squeezed her hand. "Humanity has always been adaptable. It's how we've survived. Once they see what I see in you, they'll understand." Her smile was tentative but radiant. "Then I'll trust you." She leaned in, lips brushing his ear. "Though I hope you've learned by now not to say ouch when I bite you." Trevor laughed, wrapping his arms around her as the waves rolled in. "Lesson learned." She nipped playfully at his earlobe, and he didn't flinch this time. Instead, he pulled her into a kiss, the horizon blazing with colors, as if the universe itself celebrated their union. As night fell, Trevor reflected on the journey. A diplomatic mission meant to establish trade had instead created a marriage and alliance and a scientific revolution. He had been captured, altered, tested in ways he never expected. And yet somehow, through every trial, the constant had been Nera. Her strength, her vulnerability, her laughter, her love. Humanity, once again, it had proven its greatest strength wasn't technology or firepower. It was connection. The ability to adapt, to empathize, to forge bonds across the stars. Trevor smiled as Nera rested her head on his chest, her breath mingling with the ocean breeze. Together they gazed at the endless sky, above a sky that no longer seemed vast and lonely, but alive with promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would face them together.